Happy Sunday, folks, and welcome back. WrestleRant here today with my review of Backlash 2006. If you haven't already, go back here on the channel and listen to my reviews of Backlash 1999 through 2005. All the shows are awesome. 2006 was not as great, but still a solid show on the whole. We'll break it down right now. So kicking off the show, Carlito versus Chris Masters, former tag team partners turned enemies. A good matchup, but Carlito was kind of the organic babyface. It was really no babyface turn. It was just kind of two partners breaking up and then facing off at the pay-per-view. And Carlito did kind of go babyface for the remainder of 2006 and going into 2007. But, it's not like in a typical heel versus heel matchup. Although Carlito was a babyface, he was still doing heel underhanded tactics. But the crowd still loved him. Of the two, they obviously sided with Carlito. So usually in a heel versus heel scenario, which I'm not normally a fan of, because usually there was no one for the fans to cheer for. There was no one, they don't have any incentive to root for either guy. So at least in this case, Carlito was the more over of the two. Chris Masters, I always felt bad for. I thought he was a good athlete. He debuted in 2005, 1 year prior. I believe he had a segment at the Backlash pay-per-view, which I forgot to mention, by the way. I think he had a Master Lock challenge or something like that. And it might have been on this show, the Eugene stuff with Matt Stryker and Matt Stryker Loves Poop. I think it might have been on I think it was on this show. I believe it was. And I'll just mention that right now. I thought that was a hilarious segment. I'll probably forget later, like it did the Master Lock challenge. I don't read off the segments and stuff. I only read off the results. Like, I'm just kind of refreshing my memory by reading off of Wiki. So I don't have like a list of notes or anything. I'm just kind of going off what I remember from the match when I watched the pay-per-view and whatever. But anyway, going back to what I was saying before, Carlito versus Masters. A well-wrestled matchup, and it wasn't your typical heel versus heel matchup, so the crowd had Carlito to root behind and root for, whatever. So it was a good matchup. Both guys could have been something in WWE. Chris Masters, like I said before, could have been something had he not been booked. I mean, he was booked fine for the most part. I mean, he went undefeated for a while. No one had broken the Master Lock for about 2 years, I think it was, before Lashley finally broke it in 2007 in an anticlimactic fashion, too, just kind of out of nowhere. But the guy just wasn't exciting. His mic skills were not great. When he came back in 2009, that was when he should have been something. But still, a good matchup, had a fine story behind it. Former tag team partners going their separate ways. Carlito coming out victorious after putting his feet on the ropes. So like I said, a babyface in a way, and that the crowd was cheering for him, not necessarily based off his actions. And I think it was the first time that Carlito had been a babyface in WWE, so it was something new and fresh and whatever. So it was organic too. So no need to fight something that's organic. I mean, WWE should learn from that, and sometimes they do not really turn people who get over in a way. Like if they're popular, they don't always turn them babyface, but that's WWE and just their stubborn ways for you. But like I said, good opener to Backlash 06. Up next, Umaga taking on Ric Flair. Umaga, who had just debuted in WWE only a few weeks before this, the night after WrestleMania 2002, decimating Ric Flair. And if there's anyone you're going to make an impact against in your first night in, it's the Nature Boy. It's a 16-time world champion. Woo! It's the Ric Flair, baby. It is Ric Flair that you go up against, and that's exactly what Umaga did. Completely taking out Ric Flair. And the match itself was fine. It was only 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, I would have liked it for it to be longer, especially considering that Ric Flair is, fucking Ric Flair, and they just kind of made him out to look like a job guy. But maybe that was the point. Ric Flair's career was kind of winding down. I know he had 2 years left, but he wasn't like, it wasn't like he was contending for any world championships or anything like that. He was coming off of a great feud with Triple H in 2005 in the late portion of that year. But aside from that, the guy was in the Money in the Bank ladder match, I think, at WrestleMania. So he really was not doing much in his career at this point. And, there was really nothing left for him to prove. So it's not like Umaga squashed like an up-and-coming guy who could have used the boost. At least, Ric Flair is an established guy. Umaga got a dominant win out of it. And it was a good way to build him up. So if there's anyone to take that beating, it was Ric Flair. Would have liked it to go a little longer, but a nice, dominant, establishing victory for the Samoan Bulldozer in only his first month in WWE. So an effective squash there for Umaga. Up next for the Women's Championship, a rematch from WrestleMania. Trish Stratus contending for the Women's Championship, invoking her rematch clause against the current champion, Mickie James. So the match itself was fine, but it barely even got started before it abruptly ended with Mickie James losing via disqualification. I think I don't remember how she cheated. I think she hit her with something. I can't remember exactly, but there was at one point in the match, so almost 2 years consecutively in a row. 1 year was legitimate and 1 year was not. '05 Trish wasn't actually injured. I think she was injured before that night, and they just used her getting squashed by Viscera. I always mispronounce the name. They kind of used that as the storyline reason as to why she was out for as long as she was. On this show, anyway, she was legitimately injured. She fell off the top rope. I think she dislocated her shoulder. And I did do some research after I was done watching the show, in that they popped the shoulder back in immediately after the show ended, and she was gone for maybe 2 months or so or something like that. But the match itself, while it lasted, was fine, but it never really got that, extra gear because of what happened, because it abruptly ended. They had to improvise. They went to a disqualification, and I doubt Trish Stratus was supposed to win the belt anyway. I'm sure Mickie James would have retained regardless. Otherwise, they would have done the title switch. And Mickie James had just won the championship, so it would have been foolish to think that Trish Stratus would have regained it on the show regardless. But, I can't really shit on the finish and say it was weak and that the match was weak because it was out of their control. I'm sure that was not planned and that it ended so abruptly because of Trish's injury. She obviously could not do much. So I can't really rate it or say much about it. It was kind of an unfortunate situation, and I think the feud did not wrap up at that moment, but they did probably wrap it up when Trish came back. I can't tell you exactly, but I can't shit on the matchup because, what happened, but it was unfortunate nevertheless. Up next, a winner-take-alls match for Shelton Benjamin's Intercontinental Championship and RVD's Money in the Bank briefcase. So a great match here. I don't know if it got more time because of what happened in the women's title match, and they said go out there and make up for the time that they lost. But either way, it was a great matchup, as you could only expect. You had Benjamin, you had RVD, two of the best, most entertaining, athletic guys in the entire company at this period in time, going out there and just putting on a hell of a show. From an in-ring standpoint, the story was, it was what it was. RVD winning at WrestleMania, Shelton Benjamin being the Intercontinental Champion. Not much of a story, but it was innovative. We had never seen it before. I don't think we've seen it since, with the Money in the Bank winner being a dual champion. I don't think we've ever seen that. I think Miz was the United States champion at the time? Yeah, Miz was United States champion at the time that he won the briefcase, but it wasn't like he won the briefcase first and then won the mid-card title. So RVD was kind of, I think, the first and only person to do that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was the first and only person to win the briefcase and then win a championship afterwards. I think a mid-card belt anyway. Maybe other people won a tag team championship. But nevertheless, the match itself was great. Really, really enjoyed it. Once again, a way to put over Shelton Benjamin, although in the past 2 years, he did go over against Ric Flair and Chris Jericho in the opener, nevertheless, of Backlash. He did not win in this matchup. That win went to RVD, but it was still great for him to be in there with Rob Van Dam and have a strong showing and look great in defeat. So a really nice matchup. Loved it. RVD goes over, the new Intercontinental Champion and still Mr. Money in the Bank. Some people don't like it when they put their briefcases on the line, their Money in the Bank contracts. I could see why. I understand the rationale there in that you don't want, people, they work so hard to get that contract, so why would they put it on the line in a singles match? I get that, but I also like it. I don't know. It's just bias. I absolutely understand where people are coming from with that argument. But for me anyway, I think it's a fine way for the contract winner to kind of prove their worth as Mr. Money in the Bank and putting that on the line. Is it dumb? Is it illogical? Sure, but I don't really have much of a problem with it personally, so I didn't really mind it on this show. And like I said, it made the matchup that much more exciting as far as who wins. It's not like only the Intercontinental Championship was on the line. The briefcase was on the line too. Maybe it made it more predictable that RVD was going to win. I have no idea, but I think the match itself was really well wrestled, and that made up for any predictability factor about it anyway. So great stuff there, and what I thought was the second best match of the night. Up next, Big Show versus Kane. So if this matchup happened 9 years later in 2015, I'd have to gouge my eyes out. But thankfully, this was still at a time when both guys were relatively relevant for the most part. They were coming off their big tag team title run. They lost the tag team titles, I think, the night after WrestleMania to the Spirit Squad, after Kane started hearing voices with the May 19th stuff. And that was the day that his new movie, See No Evil, came out. So that was the whole reason why, that whole storyline started, and then, the old Kane being brought in, just a lot of stupid storyline stuff happening in WWE with Kane in 2006. The match itself, I can't really poop on it. It was, it was okay. Like I said, this is '06. It's not, 2014, 2015 when both guys, it's unbearable for me to watch Big Show. Kane I can tolerate at times, But Big Show, just for me, he just doesn't do it for me in 2015. At least, in 2006, they were still at a time where they can have a decent match. And, big person versus big person matches, giant versus giant matches, rarely ever sell. That's why Kane versus Viscera didn't do well in 2005, and that's why this matchup was not the hottest, most exciting match on the show. But it ended in a no contest. They didn't even announce it as such. I think Kane just started hearing voices, and then Big Show hit him with a steel chair, and then he just kind of walked off. So that was kind of annoying. The match itself didn't bother me, and it was a fine way of kind of furthering the feud before abruptly dropping it. Kind of seemed a little pointless, but the non-finish was what bothered me. I mean, I would have been fine if Big Show got himself DQ'd or Kane got himself DQ'd. I mean, if he hears the voices and then just goes crazy, I would have been completely fine with that. I don't know why they just didn't do that, but to have, Big Show hit him with a steel chair and then just walk off and not even announce a winner was kind of lazy in my opinion. So, wasn't really a fan of that. The match itself was okay, but the finish was pretty shit. So, and then the feud was kind of pointless too. So on the whole, not my favorite match on the show, obviously. Up next, a tag team match contested under no-holds-barred rules, which means no rules pretty much at all, with Mr. McMahon and Shane McMahon taking on Shawn Michaels and God. Yeah, so God tag teaming with Shawn Michaels, and this was kind of stemming from their bout at WrestleMania. I mean, I wasn't a fan of 2006, but after watching all these different pay-per-views, after watching WrestleMania 22, and this show, and all the pay-per-views from mid-2006, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. I know it even won the award for worst feud of the year, but for them to drag this feud on between Michaels and the McMahons and later incorporating Triple H, which got some funny skits out of it, but the early goings there with God, like, why not just rush into that? Why not just... I mean, I'm not a fan of them rushing storylines, but if there was any time to rush a storyline, it was with this one to incorporate God. It was tasteless. It was dumb. I know it was '06, so it's a little bit... You could just kind of have to expect that kind of thing. Doesn't make it any more right, though. I thought it was stupid. I'm not I'm a Christian, of course, but I'm not like a very religious person more to the point where this offended me. I just thought it was stupid. The whole God thing and him coming down to Brodus Clay's music, an instrumental version. That was a little bit comical, but everything else I thought, the build-up and stuff like that. It made for some funny skits, but for the most part, though, it was tasteless. It was dumb. Only in WWE. Only would Vince do something like this. I wasn't offended. I just thought it was so stupid. But the match itself, though, they made the most of it, much like a WrestleMania 22, which I thought was going to be a train wreck. They made the most of it. Not a great match, but it was entertaining for what it was, with Michaels kind of carrying the load, and then Mr. McMahon just kind of holding his own as well. And then you had Shane in there, too, who also did a really good job in selling for Michaels, and Michaels kind of overcoming the odds between the McMahons, and then you had the Spirit Squad get involved, and Shawn jumping off a ladder on top of the Spirit Squad. So the match itself was more fun than it had any right to be, but again, it was not a 5-star classic or anything like that. If you're expecting that in a match from the McMahons and God and then Michaels, then you're just fooling yourself. But yeah, I mean, it was better than expected, although that is not saying much because I wasn't really looking forward to this match to begin with. They made the most of it. I'll say that much. I don't want to shit on it because I think they made the most of it. Not a fan at all of the feud that they were having at that time, and they continue to have going forward. But for one night, though, from what they were given in the handicap scenario or a tag team match as McMahon billed it, they made the most of it, and it was enjoyable at points. I will say that much. So we get to the main event, which was all enjoyable, a triple threat match for the WWE Championship, John Cena defending against Triple H and Edge. So an absolutely terrific, and like I said on Twitter, one of the best triple threat matches I've ever seen, to be quite honest with you. I thought this was a phenomenal match. Was only given 17 minutes, less time than the Intercontinental title match, but it felt like a half an hour, and I mean that in the best way possible. I felt like these guys went out there and had a hell of a showing, all three of these guys. And even before I get into the match, too, I felt, it was a bit weird and not unnecessary. I know they kind of tended to do this at the time. And this was around the time, John Cena was getting the Let's Go Cena, Cena Sucks chance, and that kind of started happening. That became a trend, and they were acknowledging it on TV and whatever. And then at countless points during the show and during this match was Jim Ross and especially, Todd Grisham and Jerry Lawler, whoever, saying on commentary and in backstage segments, whatever, that John Cena was the most controversial WWE champion in history. And the Salamonster at Salamonster on Twitter, listen to his podcast all the time. He picked up on this, so it's not really me. It's not my idea, but he's talked about in the past how John Cena was more polarizing than is polarizing than he is controversial. Controversial was like if he did a horrendous act, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding it, whether people are in favor of it, against it, whatever. Polarizing, John Cena has never done anything controversial. He's a polarizing figure, and there's a lot of people that like him and don't like him, but in terms of controversy, there's no such thing when it comes to John Cena. So that was a little bit annoying when they're driving that narrative home countless times. Once is enough, but to do it 4 or 5 times is a bit annoying. But the match itself, though, like I said, was phenomenal. I thought all 3 guys went out there and had a hell of a showing. It was as basic as it gets in terms of stories going into it. I think Triple H beat Cena, Cena beat Edge, and then Edge beat Triple H. So all these guys had something over the other. That was kind of the story going into it. John Cena trying to prove himself, and them driving home the fact that he did not have to be pinned to lose his championship here. And Edge was kind of being rebuilt back into the title picture after losing the title in anticlimactic fashion only a couple months earlier. And after the amazing match he had with Mick at Backlash, and Triple H was heavily being cheered. Edge was, a fan favorite too, and people crapping all over John Cena. But this was right before Triple H turned babyface, so the crowd is very much in his corner throughout most of the match. Probably the most over guy in the bout in terms of, a favorable reaction from the live crowd. But from an in-ring standpoint, an absolutely great match. Like I said before, I hate to keep on repeating myself, but if you haven't seen this match, or if you have not seen it or haven't seen it in a while, you're doing yourself a major disservice. As I thought, like I said, and maybe this is a lot of high praise and a lot of it's a bold statement to make, but easily one of the best triple threat matches I've ever seen. A lot of false finishes, a lot of spears and FUs and pedigrees and all this other kind of stuff. All 3 guys came out of this thing looking like stars. The post-match stuff was weird. Triple H beat the shit out of Cena, and then the referee, and I think Edge too, to close out the show. So I don't know if they continued that with that feud. And like I said, it was not a long, much longer after this that he turned babyface. So for him to go all heel and just beat the shit out of everybody was a heel tactic that people just cheered it anyway. While I think John Cena's music played. So maybe they try to turn him heel, and people like, the officials are thinking, so maybe if he does this, we'll get people to turn on him. I don't think so. I think the case from the get-go, the scenario, what the plan was from the start was to turn him babyface and do the DX stuff, because why else would Shawn Michaels and Triple H both, tease a DX reunion and doing all the chops and stuff, So I think it was kind of planned from the start, but for him to go all heel here was a little bit weird at the end. But the match itself, fantastic. Absolutely. And I thought it was, like I said before, one of, if not the best triple threat match I've ever seen. Up there with the triple threat match from WrestleMania 30 between Bryan, Batista, and Orton. I'm trying to think of other triple threat matches that, overtly impressed me. And maybe if I really thought long and hard about it, I could think of one. But for right now, though, this is, maybe it's just because it's fresh in my mind. But, a phenomenal matchup, and all 3 guys deserve massive credit for putting together just a great, great match. And an amazing way to go out the show, too. So on the whole, I didn't think it lived up to the same standards that the other Backlash shows did, because I thought all the other Backlash shows were either really, really good or great to awesome. I didn't think this show was awesome by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't even, I would call it, maybe I would call it good, but I'd probably have to go with the term solid. I thought on the whole, it was a solid show if you look at it. Start to finish, in a nutshell here, Carlito and Masters. A match that didn't really mean much, but from a story standpoint, it was simple, it was effective, a nice, well-wrestled matchup to kick off the show. Umaga Flair, an effective squash match. The women's title match was not what it could have been due to what happened at the end with Trish's injury. Benjamin and RVD having a great match. Big Show and Kane was what it was. The no-holds-barred tag team match, silly, but they made the most of it, and then the main event was phenomenal. So for RVD and Benjamin in the main event alone, this show is worth watching, but all the other stuff is not bad. It's decent. Some of it is good. Some of it is effective. So I would recommend that you go out of your way to watch this show. The other shows were a little bit better from an entertainment standpoint, but I still thought this was a pretty good show on the whole. And like I said, I would use the term solid to describe it overall. So that is my review of Backlash 2006. I appreciate you guys viewing. Make sure to share, subscribe, like, and comment. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com. /graham.gsm.matthews on WrestleRant, at WrestleRant on the Twitter, and make sure to subscribe as well. So I'll be back on Tuesday with my review of Backlash 2007. Until then, guys, have a great week, and I'll catch you guys on Tuesday.